It's time again for our monthly wrap-up. July went screaming by and we're in August, so I'm going to talk about the 10 books that I read in July. I'll give you a little summary as well as my favorite quote from the book. This is a no spoilers episode, so don't fear, I will not spoil anything for you. That being said, let's jump right in. The first book I read this month was The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book follows three women. One named Essen, who has just lost her son and is traveling the world to find her daughter after a world-ending event. This book follows two other women, one as a young girl and one in her mid-20s, and they're all in different stages of their lives. And it helps us to learn more about the stillness and the people who live in it. We learn about the races, the lore, and the magic of this world through the three women and their different journeys. This was a fantastic book and a fantastic first book. It almost reads like lit fic. I initially rated it 4 out of 5 stars, but now that I've read the whole series, I definitely would rate it 5 out of 5 stars. Here's one of my favorite quotes from the book. When we say the world has ended, it's usually a lie because the planet is just fine. But this is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. This is the way the world ends. For the last time. The second book I read this month was by Emily Henry, and we all know that I'm a huge Emily Henry fan, so of course I loved this book. This book is about a woman named Daphne who's trying to find herself again after her fiancé dumps her for his childhood best friend a few days before their wedding. She ends up moving in with her ex's ex, Miles, who she knows very little about. She just assumes that he's a stoner who does odd jobs. When Miles and Daphne are invited to their ex's wedding, they decide to pretend like they are dating to get back at them. Like any Emily Henry book, this book is about more than just romance. It's about a woman truly finding her place after a lifetime of wandering around and fitting in her life to match others. While I'm not sure this is my favorite Emily Henry book, it's definitely close. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars. It's a bit spicy, but all her books are. Here's my favorite quote from the book. You, my girl, are whoever you decide to be, but I hope you always keep some piece of that girl who sat by the window, hoping for the best. Life's short enough without talking ourselves out of hope and trying to dodge every bad feeling. Sometimes you have to push through the discomfort instead of running. The third book I read this month was The Near Witch by V.E. Schwab. Now, I just loved The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and this book is V.E. Schwab's first novel. So it wasn't nearly as good as Addie LaRue, but it was still a fantastic read. This book is about a girl named Lexi who lives in a very small town called Near. When I say small, it's itty-bitty. Near is tucked into the woods and far away from all of the other big cities, so everyone knows everyone. That is, until a stranger shows up. Coincidentally, when the stranger appears the next morning, a child goes missing. Lexi, who is trained by her father to be a tracker, goes to find the missing boy. However, her uncle keeps telling her to stay inside. However, she chooses to ignore him. She finds the stranger, and he tries to help as well. Of course, the town blames the stranger instead of digging deeper into the mystery. This book was a fun little YA fantasy romance. It's completely clean, and I would say it's suitable for kids 12 and older, though I think 14 and up would probably enjoy this more. I love V.E. Schwab's writing and the complexity of the language that she chooses. If you like a little folklore, witches, or fairy tales, then this would be a great book for you. I rated it 4 out of 5 stars. Here's a quote from the book. The trees all whisper, leaves gossiping. The stones are heavy, thinkers, the sullen silent type. He used to make up stories for everything in nature, giving it all voices, lives. If the moor wind ever sings, you mustn't listen. Not with all your ears. Use only the edges. Listen the way you'd look out the corners of your eyes. The wind is lonely, love, and always looking for company. The fourth book I read this month was the second book in the Broken Earth Trilogy by N.K. Jemisin. This book did not disappoint. Now, I honestly can't talk about it too much without giving away stuff from the first book, but it's a great continuation of the story and it has multiple POV shifts. The book switches from second person to third person. Occasionally, it's in first person. There are also interesting asides that delve into the history of the planet and its magic. In this book, Essen and Nasun learn more about magic and what their powers and their own orogeny mean. You get the sense of what happened to the ancient civilizations that came before. I love this dystopian style of magic. Usually dystopian books are sci-fi, so it's fun to read a dystopian fantasy. I rated this book 4.5 stars out of 5. I love the themes explored throughout the novel, and I cannot tell you anything else without spoiling. Here's my favorite quote from the novel. The way of the world isn't the strong devouring the weak, but the weak deceiving and poisoning and whispering in the ears of the strong until they become weak too. The fifth book I read this month was The Phoenix Crown by Kate Quinn. Wow, Kate Quinn does it again, and this time with the aid of a new writer, Janie Chang. They have really made something special. I've only read World War II books from Quinn so far, so I was happy to read about a different time period. In this book, 4 women are brought together to take down a man. Now, I will say this plot was a bit tropey. I've seen this trope done in a number of books, such as Fried Green Tomatoes or In Someone Else's Shoes. But I think that the characters and the setting were unique and interesting. I also love that these women were not in their 20s and they were still trying to figure it out. It's nice to see older women working together. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars, only because it was a bit predictable. I couldn't find a quote from this novel because I returned it too early, and the internet doesn't have a lot of quotes on this book. It's brand new. It's beautiful. Go give it a read. Book 6 was the last book of the Broken Earth Trilogy. And again, I can't talk much about this other than to say that this book made the whole series worth it for me. I absolutely loved the character growth and the pacing of this book. It was a beautiful end to the series. I love how these books cover racism without being heavy-handed or overly political. It made me pause to think about my own role in continuing the racism in my own country without hammering it in with a clear-cut message. I rated this book a 5 out of 5 stars. It's fast-paced, it's thoughtful, and it really ties everything together. Here's my favorite quote from the book. "They're afraid because we exist," she says. "There's nothing we did to provoke their fear other than exist. There is nothing we can do to earn their approval except stop existing. So we can either die like they want or laugh at their cowardice and go on with our lives." Book number 7 for this month was Normal People by Sally Rooney. While this book is huge on BookTok and Bookstagram, I wasn't here for it. The first half of the book had me hook, line, and sinker. And then the second half of the book was just like the first half in reverse. And they keep getting, caught up in the same issues over and over again. Now, I understand that this is realistic, that people get stuck in patterns, and it's difficult not to just fall back into those patterns. But the repetition in this book just felt heavy-handed and frustrating. I also thought the ending of this book ruined the book for me. Maybe I wasn't clear on what the main conflict was, but I didn't feel like the end resolved the main conflict. And again, you could argue with me about that it's just real life, but to me, that's not good literature. All in all, I rated this a 3, maybe even a 2.5. If you liked this book, please tell me why in the comments below. Maybe I just need to understand it better. I could have missed something. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Here is my favorite quote from the book. She closes her eyes. He probably won't come back, she thinks, or he will differently. What they have now, they can never have back again. But for her, the pain of loneliness will be nothing to that pain that she used to feel of being unworthy. He brought her to goodness like a gift, and now it belonged to her. Meanwhile, his life opens out before him in all directions at once. They've done a lot of good for each other. Really, she thinks, really. People can really change one another. Book 8 was The Maid. Again, this is a book that I've seen everywhere online. Or maybe it's not. The cover looks very similar to a book I keep seeing everywhere online. But I thought for sure that this was going to be a thriller, but it was a cozy mystery instead. Molly Maid, a girl who doesn't understand people much, like Eleanor Oliphant, works hard at a hotel until one day a very powerful and famous man dies, and Molly takes the blame for this death. I really enjoyed Molly as the main character, but I found that parts of this book felt very forced. It was also fairly predictable. For me, it was a 3-star book. I had a lot of fun reading it, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. Here's a quote from the novel. I wasn't 100% sure what I had seen. I've learned to doubt myself and my perceptions of the world around me. I do realize I'm different from you and different from most. What I perceive isn't what you perceive. Plus, people don't always listen to me. I'm often afraid I won't be believed and that my thoughts will be discounted. I'm just a maid, a nobody. And what I saw in the moment, it felt like a dream. But I know now that it was real. The 9th book I read was Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. If you're looking for my favorite romance of the year, then look no further than Dark Matter. Now, I'm sure you're thinking, Sam, this book is marketed as sci-fi and a thriller. It's definitely not a romance. However, the whole book, the main male character is trying to get back to his wife. And not just any version of his wife, but the one he fell in love with. If that's not romance, then I don't know what is. In this book, physics professor Jemisin is kidnapped and forced into a box. When he awakens, he's in another world, a world like his, but missing all the people he knows and loves. At first, he thinks he's crazy, but then he learns he's just in an alternative dimension where he's the same person, but he made several different life choices. This book is fast-paced and keeps you on the edge of your seat. However, my favorite part of this book is how it addresses the ideas of regret and the choices that we make. I rated this book 5 out of 5 stars, and it was probably my favorite book of the month. Here's a quote. We are more than the sum total of our choices, that all the paths we might have taken factor somehow into the math of our identity. The last book I read this month was the Book of Doors. I barely snuck it in there. This was a low fantasy thriller. I think this is the first fantasy thriller that I've ever read, but my goodness, I hope there's more. In this book, Cassie is given a book from an older gentleman she becomes friends with at the bookstore she works at. When she goes home, she finds that she can use this book to open doors to anywhere in the world. As long as she can picture it in her head, she opens the door and she's there. However, it turns out that there are, of course, a number of shady characters after this book, and would stop at nothing to get their hands on it. This book actually covered a number of the same topics and themes as Dark Matter, but in different ways, which I thought was really fun and interesting. I gave this book a 4.5 out of 5 stars. It's fun and requires no extra thinking, which is great sometimes. Here's my favorite quote from the book. Happiness is not something you can sit and wait for. You have to choose it and pursue it in spite of everything else. It's not going to be given to you. It's difficult to say which of these books was my favorite of this month. I thoroughly enjoyed the Broken Earth Trilogy. It reads like lit fic, and it does such a great job at exploring difficult topics in a meaningful way. Also, the world building and the system of magic in that book, just amazing. I also loved Dark Matter. It was not nearly as beautiful as Jemisin's work, but it was fun and it kept me on my toes. Both pieces are books I would highly recommend. Speaking of the books I've read this month, if you've read any of these, make sure you leave a comment about it. Did you agree with me? Did you not? Let me know why. If you liked Normal People, especially let me know why. Or if you hated Dark Matter, why? Make sure to give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. This way you can keep updated with the books I'm reading and covering. Or if you're listening to this podcast, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and leave the podcast a review. Your reviews help other people to find my content and help grow our reading community. If you want to know what I'm currently reading, you can find me on Instagram, TikTok, or on Goodreads. I try to keep those places updated with my current read. Also, if you want to connect with me, you can send me an email to atyet or atyet33@gmail.com. And make sure you join me next week as I review one of my favorite reads from June, Real Americans by Rachel Kang. Thanks for listening and happy reading. This episode was written by me, Sam Gunther, and edited by Dallin Gunther.